Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Past episodes of the Authentic Business Adventures program can be found on the podcast link at drawincustomers.com. We're locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. My name is James Kademan, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and helpful coach to small business owners across the country. Today, we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Joshua Rhodes, the founder of Rhodes to Wealth podcast. Joshua, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, James. Yeah. Happy Monday. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be recording here with you. This is super cool. So Rhodes to Wealth, the podcast, let's just lay a foundation here for the listeners. What is that?
Yeah, definitely. The short of it is it's a podcast that I interview folks that have built wealth in a variety of ways in an effort to understand how they built that wealth, a bit about their journey. And then if that avenue speaks to us, how we could rinse and replicate that success with a few, 1, 2, 3 tactical steps, how to get momentum in that direction.
All right. It's interesting. So you're essentially learning from your guests and helping to spread the news or the experiences of your guests about how they made some money. I suppose similar to how we do it with entrepreneurs and how to start your business kind of thing.
You're exactly right. I started this podcast out of sheer desperation. Yeah, just desperation, man. And you're exactly right. At the bottom of my website, I have something like, I'm a student to you all, or I'm a student to the game, something like that.
All right.
This is absolutely a learning or educational journey for me. And I started this out of desperation because when I was getting ready to graduate or after graduating college, I took a sales role. I started building a little bit of disposable income. But my father, when my mother was pregnant with me, he's going to play baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My dad drops out of baseball. He goes to work at a power plant to support my mother and I. And my dad, he still works at that power plant today. And so the idea of hard work and wearing responsibility and effort, I wear that. It's in my blood. It's in the Rhodes blood.
Yeah.
But as a first generation graduate from college, finding myself building a little bit of disposable income, when I go talk to my dad about, Dad, the money that you're not spending month over month, what are you doing with that?
Yeah.
My dad did not have an answer. He was telling me about, save 7% or whatever he was trying to get me, but it is not the best advice. And I quickly maxed out where he was going to go with this. And so I'm a bookworm, a podcast fiend. Like I cannot consume enough information. And so after maxing out or tapping out my dad's sort of direction, I went to books, I went to podcasts, but rather than trying to take their words and use them myself. I mean, these folks that are writing books, they're much older. They have children. They're in different states. They have different goals. We're very different, right? So following the exact roadmap that they laid out didn't quite make sense to me. Rather, I read their books. I listened to their podcast. I've read their blogs, and I reached out to them directly and said, hey, Dory Clark or whoever, I've read your book. I've consumed loads of your material, and here's where I'm at. I've tried to implement some things of yours, and I'm stuck in X. I'd like to chat with you for a bit. I called that the Rhodes to Wealth hit list. There's about 50 folks on it. I sent out, let's call it 50 emails before I ever recorded a podcast, and the response rate to those first 50, it was like 60, 70%. It was really, really high.
That's impressive.
Really high. People were responding and saying, I would love to connect. I'd love to talk with you. Here's some guidance. And kind of backed up and said, rather than me having one-on-one conversations with these people, maybe I should record them. And so if you hit my podcast, there's no advertisements. I don't have any services or anything that I'm supporting the podcast with as far as supplemental income. This is me on my journey, looking to find ways to build passive income, to build wealth, and recording the conversations I've had along the way.
Nice. So how many episodes have you done so far?
So I've recorded probably about 205, just under that. But I've released about 65. Yeah, so I'm queued way up. Yeah. I do one a week. And so I find at times someone will crush an episode or I'll have a really good time. And then I've got to sort of sort out where do I put them in the follow-up. But I can stop recording today and have, 3-ish years worth of material.
Wow. Yeah, it's I underestimated the editing
Yeah,
and as far as time goes,
totally.
and I certainly underestimated the follow up and stuff like that. It's funny, I suppose similar to you, right? It's fun.
Mm,
It's arguably as much, if not more so, for my education as it is for my listeners.
totally.
And I know from the response I get that listeners are learning stuff too, which is super cool. I mean, that's the goal. That's why you spread it, I suppose, like that. But it's not a direct money maker at
That's
all.
right. Yeah. I mean, it's gotten a plate spinning, and I'm happy to talk about. I have made money from the podcast, not
Have you really?
directly. Yeah, not directly, but uh, I've had other job opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
investor opportunities, mentorship opportunities
Mm-hmm.
surface, and I've capitalized on a few of them. I have two in flight now of millennial advisor type roles where
Oh, nice.
I've gotten done with the interview, and they've said, listen, you've obviously done your research. You're interested in the avenue. Do
Mm-hmm.
you want to double click and maybe take this journey with me? And there's two or three of them that I've sort of attached myself to, and we'll see where it
Very
goes.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. I've gotten clients from it, so that's cool. But yeah.
So
It's
that's yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say that's the interesting thing, right? Is I mean the reason to start a podcast.
mm-hmm.
There are unlimited reasons, right? Some people just
Totally.
talk with their friends. I've sort of broken it down to 3 or 4 reasons I think people start podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
The number one is those that are experts in the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those that are mentors or doctors or teachers or professors. They've been doing it 35 years. It makes sense. People come to their podcast because they know what they're talking about, right? The
Right.
host knows what they're talking about. And so typically it's a solo podcast or they're just sharing their knowledge and they're giving little lessons and material. The
Mm-hmm.
other reason, the second reason is like I'm doing where I'm a student and I don't know enough.
Mm.
I'd like to know more. And I had this option of like, do I invest in masterminds and in books and podcasts and webinars? And do I put my money there? Or do I try to put some capital towards this podcast and have one-on-one conversations? I
Right.
mentioned Dory Clark earlier. Her half-day business evaluation session to come in, evaluate your business, and give you some feedback. The half-day session, it's $9,000. She sat down with me for 2 hours for free because I have a
2
podcast.
hours.
Because I have a podcast, right? So
Wow.
you open the door from a student perspective to
Yeah.
mentors and leaders and
Mm-hmm.
advisors that you can never contact without a platform to interview
Right.
them with. The
Yeah.
third reason, I mean, first you're a teacher, second you're a student. The third reason, the reason I brought this up, you mentioned it, you own a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had folks on my podcast. Josh Elledge is the best in the world at this from what I've found.
Mm-hmm.
If you invite potential customers or interview potential customers on a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, after you get done, if you've done your research, you've asked great questions, that potential customer gets off the line and says, man, that was a really good interview. I'm gonna go listen to some of his other ones.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're in a weekly cadence with that customer. You're in his
Mm-hmm.
ears, her ears, even if you're not calling them or emailing them. I found one of the guys that came to my podcast brought this study and said that they surveyed these pipe fitters. They went to a pipe fitting company.
All right.
And the inbounds that came into this pipe fitting company, 20 to 30% of them were closed in the first 60 days. The
Wow.
remainder, the 70%, 80%, went from day 61 through the end of the year, right? And at any point in time between day 61 and the end of the year, they're reaching back out for business or they find another competitor. So how do you keep a cadence? How do you keep contact with a potential customer from day 61 through 365?
Right.
As a sales guy, I don't have a very good answer for that, right? Emails and phone calls, but what am I saying? Hey guys, just wanted to check in. Happy Monday, right? So having a podcast and crushing that, giving them
Mm-hmm.
great value, saying, go share this with your network. They loved it. Then they come and listen to you every Monday or every Wednesday, whatever your podcast releases.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes time to purchase, when they think, okay, now it's time I need to go fit these pipes or whatever that is. From my stance,
Right.
I'm ready to move forward with the cybersecurity solution. Who do I go with? I think that they would likely lean to the person they listen to every Monday, right? They had a great conversation with you, even if they don't buy in the first 60 days, because you've because you've planted that seed and
Mm-hmm.
they continue to check back into your podcast. If you hear something that relates with them, you can snip it and send it to them and say, hey man, I thought about you. It's a fantastic way to keep a relationship, not only with listeners, but with potential customers.
Totally. Yeah. And you're keeping top of mind.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
is, you can't, when you're competing with other salespeople, they don't either take the time to do that, or they certainly, like you said, they don't have anything to share.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, how do you differentiate? I think people now are trying to lead on sending video follow-ups and
Right.
like, I'm going to write your name on a whiteboard and say, hey, Steve, how's it going? But that doesn't, it's not going to get you very far.
Kind of
Right. So
gimmicky. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because as far as the sales thing goes, I mean, stuff that you're selling is on a different level as far as the number of people that have to be involved in that decision.
Yeah.
When I'm selling call answering services to a small business, you got the owner is right there, because generally speaking, we're going after clients that are 10 employees and under.
Sure.
So it's pretty easy to get I should say it's kind of easy to get the owner on the phone. If it's hard to get them on the phone, they probably totally need us.
Yeah. Right.
But we reach out a couple times and you have a conversation. If they're still kicking tires after 2 meetings, I don't chase them.
Yeah. I mean, so out of curiosity, are you using the podcast as a prospecting engine? I only ask that because I pitched that to my business last year and this year. Let me start a podcast on the West Coast. I will take a business development rep and reach out to my perfect client and say, hey, Mr. CISO, Mr. IT director, we're not looking to prospect to you. Do you want to come on our podcast? And then you can run a discovery level call. I'm putting in quotations, discovery level call on a podcast and provide that level of value. Is that more or less how you go about things?
No, I mean, that's not to say that I shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I've kept the podcast, Authentic
Totally
Business
separate.
Adventures, more or less independent of Calls on Call, as far as overlapping with clients or trying to get potential clients on the air. That said, Authentic Business Adventures is a podcast that gears towards small business, and Calls on Call is geared towards small business as well. So there's certainly some overlap, but I have never, and this is funny now that I'm thinking about it, I've had guests on the show that would be ideal clients, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
Like, like let's say a small town or a small business painter. Guy's got a crew of maybe 5-10 guys, something like that, or a couple crews of 5 guys each. He's ideal.
Yeah.
And I've had businesses of that size on the podcast, but I never reached out to them and said, hey, you're on the podcast. You want us to answer your phone?
Yeah.
I just, and that said, there probably would be some value to that.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, by the way, I mean, we're trustworthy and all that jazz. You know what we do. Maybe now that we're hitting, I don't even know how many we've done. 250, 260. I think maybe we're almost up to 270 podcasts.
Wow.
So, and we do one a week, generally speaking. So like before, I mean, there's some guys that I interviewed that I was probably we're in 50 podcasts or something like that. And a lot of times people will start up podcasts and then they'll kind of fizzle out.
Totally.
Where, I don't know, I suppose just like authors or something like that. They're like, I'm going to write a book and become a millionaire. And it's not quite that much of a light switch.
Yeah.
So maybe I feel like we have more clout or credit now. I don't know. I also didn't want to be guilty of saying like, I want you on this podcast. And by the way, can we answer your phones? And it's like, hey, you want to buy a watch? Kind of.
Yeah.
Like I didn't.
That was my biggest fear. Talking to the guy that I referenced earlier, Josh Elledge, that was the question I brought into the podcast. He told me every $200 to $300 he puts into his podcast, he gets $4,000 to $6,000 out. So
he's got all day.
Yeah, he's got this machine. He's got this machine figured out, right? Of this prospecting engine. As I interview people, he books a 10 to 15 minute call right after the podcast. It's like days after the podcast.
Yeah.
And he says the exact conversation you're talking about of, hey, listen, I really, really enjoyed that conversation a couple days ago. My juices have been flowing for 48 hours.
Yeah.
I've gone out, I've done some more research, blah, blah, blah. I cannot stop thinking about it. By the way, man, as I asked you a couple questions, you mentioned you had a really poor follow-up process. I, for a living, run a call center that does X.
Right.
Do we have synergy? And he said, 80% of the time, those people say, dude, kick rocks. No, we don't. But, it's great to know about you. But yeah, the turnaround there, is being able to land a couple clients, I guess, obviously from the ins and outs, does more than enough to pay for the business. As you look at the amount of money he's putting in versus the amount he's pulling out of it.
I like that. I'm
Yeah.
going to check that out. That's
Yeah.
impressive. Yeah, it's one of those things that's always been like, this is the podcast. This is kind of the silo. And I wanted to keep the silo separate to eliminate the slime. But on the flip side, if you don't ask, you don't sell. So,
yeah. Especially if you talk to a few perfect clients, right?
Yeah.
It's worth taking a swing for.
Yeah.
Especially you've got a relationship there now. Yeah.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
Typically, it's funny, and you probably know this too, right? After you interview someone, a lot of times, unless they got something going on, you'll end up chatting. A lot of times this was in the studio for local stuff. People end up chatting for another hour.
Yeah.
It took them a little time to loosen up, to open up. You ask them a question that triggered something, or they're like, hey, I didn't want to say this on the podcast, but this is blah, 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 blah.
Definitely.
Super cool.
Yeah. Listen, I could talk about why and how to start a podcast all day long, but one of my favorite things that I've pulled so far, and I don't think I read this anywhere, but I don't want to say that I came up with it just in case.
Sure.
I have started to send out a board of advisors email. And so every 25 episodes, I send out an email and I just BCC everyone that I've interviewed, the episodes that I've released. So it's not 200, right? But it's 60 something in the BCC. So they don't see who all got the email. And it's an update of, guys, here's who I've spoken with over the last 25 weeks.
Oh, that's cool.
Here's some of the major things I've done. I've taken 2 courses by these 2 people. And it's just an update on me. Right? Here's everything that I've done and what I'm looking to do. At the very end, and I'll say it's at the very top, hey guys, too late, didn't read. There's an ask at the very end. At the very end, I'll ask 1 for a review, and 2, here's some folks that I'm trying to chase for my podcast right now, potential guests.
All right.
If you guys have relationships, mutual connections, would love an introduction. And because I've got those relationships, I'd like to think that I did enough research to crush their episodes. It has been huge. And a lot of the times that's how I've gotten the feedback of, we'd like to pull you on board. Is, hey, we'd love what you have going on. This is a great follow-up, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to talk for a second? And see, we have room for an advisor. Do you want to come on here? That's how both of these opportunities have come up, is from that follow-up. Yeah.
Wow. So when you're asking for reviews, is that reviews for the podcast?
That is.
I don't even know where people leave reviews for podcasts.
Yeah. Well, if it helps, I left you one this morning.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. I just release it and enjoy, man.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
On the Apple Podcasts, like if you have iTunes or if you have an Apple phone, you go into the podcast app, you go find your, type in your podcast in the search bar, hit that. And when you see all of them where you can actually subscribe and you see all of your podcasts listed, you scroll down to the very bottom of that, it'll actually say write a review. You can rate them 1 through 5 stars, then write a review for them. And so I encourage folks, both guests, like if you book yourself on my podcast, you can't book yourself without writing a review. And then in my follow-up, I ask everybody, hey guys, if you didn't have a chance, please leave a review there. So at least per guest, I'm getting one review.
Nice. And that's exclusive to the iTunes.
Yeah, all the other platforms have their way of doing things, but that sort of 80-20 principle, I think if you're looking at iTunes and maybe Spotify, now that Rogan and folks are over there, you're getting the 2 big fish.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's so funny. I've never even dawned on me. I've been so concerned with my businesses, really.
Totally.
The podcast is, it's fun and education, but it's certainly not something that I really paid attention to. Definitely not from a marketing standpoint.
Well, you've got a couple good reviews, and
sweet.
I left you another one. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. I'm a podcast host who doesn't even know what the reviews are. It's one of those things. You're just like, hey, you gotta decide what plates you're gonna spin.
That's exactly right.
So interesting. I'll have to have one of my crew check that out.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of having a crew, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Tell me, before we shift into this Roads to Wealth with more detail, tell me about the Adam to God picture you got behind you.
Oh, well, you're not going to like the overview. This was, this was brought in from My lady, I've been with my girlfriend now 6-7 years. I met her in college on an airplane, and ended up graduating. We were an hour apart in college, and we moved in together. She brought this, so this has been in her family for 3-4 generations, and I
Wow.
believe the last 2 generations have painted over it. And so
Oh,
this is not the normal paint. It's not the normal color design, anything like that. But it's stayed home. I'm trying. It's funny you bring this up. We just had a conversation about this morning. Because I travel so frequently for the job,
hmm.
I've got a really nice camera that I bring with me.
Oh,
And
nice.
I'll take pictures, and I try to take some. I'm not a photographer by any means, but I do try to take some good pictures. And I've got some really cool ones printed out that I have in my office.
Hmm.
She uses the office. So I think I'm going to move this to my office, and I'm going to take all of the pictures, the collage
Yeah.
of San Fran, New York, this, that, and put all of those here. So
Oh, funny.
you may be catching me right at the last moment.
All right. I was assuming you're gonna be like, this is how people feel about money. They're almost within
I can feel
reach
them
or
touching
something
me.
like that.
Yeah.
You're connecting them and all, just like grab the hand
It
instead
is
of
an
just.
attention grabber though, man. I get more questions about this than anything else.
That's an iconic picture.
Yeah.
I went to school for graphic design,
Mm,
which meant that you were forced to take art history. And so you learn about pictures like that.
yeah.
And so we see it, it's just going back
Yeah.
way
Right
too
on
long
top
to
of my
college.
head.
Yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
just it gives you this spiritual.
I feel it.
I
Yeah.
gotta go with this guy.
Yeah.
So okay, roads to wealth. Tell me, in the episodes that you've done so far with people that you've interviewed, what have you learned?
Ooh, that's a great question. You know, what I've learned is that the world of money can be extremely complex if you look at
Hmm.
it at a high level. But those that do it well make it very, very simple.
All right.
And that is probably my favorite takeaway that I've learned to date. And I've talked to authors and certified financial plan, every type of wealth expert you could think of, folks that have sold their company for $250 million and bought 2 planes, right? The the biggest takeaway that I found, my first 20, 25 episodes, I interviewed certified financial planners, folks that were very good with managing money in
Hmm.
portfolios. First thing I did was automate my cash flow, the way that my money hits my bank account and what it does after that. I wanted to get out of the way, remove the emotion, and not be my own worst enemy within my
Hmm.
portfolio. Right.
All
So
right.
20-ish episodes in, I had this ability to, or I got to the point where money that hit my checking would automatically fund my my IRA, my 401k, my HSA, go into a brokerage account, swept in. Everything was automatically indexed and invested, which is
Yeah.
great. Since then, I've interviewed many entrepreneurs, and what I've found is every entrepreneur that finds success has dedicated almost all of their time to that avenue. You mentioned plate spinning earlier. Dory Clark was one of my first interviews. She
Hmm.
had this book, Entrepreneurial You. It's actually one of the things that is one of these starters, the catalysts for my podcast. But she mentions in that podcast that when you're trying to, or in that book, when you're trying to get a business or something off the ground, she correlates it, or she draws this imagery to someone that works at a circus and that spins a plate.
Hmm.
And she says, you don't see plate spinners throwing 2 or 3 plates at one time, trying to get those going at one time. The guy's got a pole, he puts the plate on top and he takes off spinning it. And once he gets that one going, he
Hmm.
puts another stick and then a second plate and then another stick and a third plate. That first one is so important. And this is a long-winded way of I've found that folks that have gone to the end and had an exit, and those that are in the midst of it, dedicate all of their time and all of their attention and all of their focus. And they'll try many things. And the second they find something that shows success, they go all the way with it.
Oh, all
Does
right.
that make sense?
Totally focus.
Yeah.
There's
But
power and focus. Yeah.
as I tell that story, this guy, Eric Bergman, he's out of great.com. He started great.com. That's who comes to mind. He sold his first business for $50 million. So I
All
asked him,
right.
how did you find that business, Cantina Media? And he had started over 15 businesses each one of them, he's like, I dedicated like a 6-week blitz. I wanted to see if anything came of it. And then I just let those exist. And I didn't pay any more attention to it. And then I started the next one and I started the next one. He's like, after like my 15th, 20th business, I just took a look back to see what is any of this working? What is going on? And only one of them was showing success. And so I circled back, picked that one up, and I put everything into it. And then he built Cantina Media and had an exit for $50 million. I think that is a perfect example of where, early stages, as you're trying to build wealth and find the investment opportunities, the passive income opportunities, and you're trying to figure out, where do I want to go? Right. You put a little bit of time into many things. And the second you find something that sparks your attention, that you find traction, that you enjoy, you run with it.
All right. Interesting. So focus. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Tell me, so I guess from my point of view, and you can tell me if there's a different point of view in the financial world.
Sure.
But I see financial investing, I guess, over the course of a lifetime in 3 general categories. Category number 1 would be when you're young and you're almost, if not totally, working hand to mouth. So I remember sitting on the bus once in college, and this guy that I knew, I don't even remember what he was. He was an instructor or teacher. He was someone I knew a few years before, and then I just happened to sit next to him on the bus. And he's like, "Man, are you throwing money at your retirement?" And I'm like, "No, I make $3.85 an hour." Right? Back when minimum wage was $3.85, long time ago. And he's like, "You got to throw money in retirement because you're young and time will build your wealth." And he was essentially telling me something that I should have done, but I was too dumb / too broke to do anything.
Yeah.
So that's one avenue, right? The young and not a whole lot of money. Then you start to actually get decent jobs that pay well, or at least better than minimum. And you start to have a little bit of extra income. And now you have some time is still on your side as far as using that time to build your wealth. But you have what you feel like is some income where you can actually make a dent, where your numbers aren't going from 100 to 110. They're going from maybe 100,000 to 110,000 or something.
Yeah.
Like that. And then you got, of course, the retirement or very close to retirement, where now you have more money, but time is not on your side. So does that kind of feel like the paths that you've learned about, or is there more distinguishing between those?
Definitely the paths that I've heard about and found and even experienced myself, right? Is, I mean, when I graduated college, I literally had $0 to Josh Rhodes, to my name. And I started at this hand to mouth stage that you're talking about. The answer is yes, you're spot on. The only thing that I would want to plug, my most popular episode that I've ever had on Roads to Wealth was by Andrew Hallam. This guy, The Millionaire Teacher is the book that he wrote.
Okay.
And he was can I remember what subject he taught? Maybe history, but he was a grade school teacher, and he retired in his 40s.
Nice.
Financially independent, retired early. He achieved FIRE, traveled the world in his 40s as a teacher. And that was my question, is like, how on a teacher's salary did you get to the point where you could achieve FIRE status and retire early? Most people work into their 70s and their 80s. How'd you get there? And he started investing before you're even at 18 or 17. When you could open an account, he had his father open up some sort of custodial account where he was able to start investing at like early ages, 15, 16 years old. He was investing money that way. And by the time he got to this retirement age, the portfolio he had built was pushing out so much money month over month that he was able to retire on the income that it was building.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think the point that I wanted to make is, be as scrappy as you possibly can, as early as you possibly can. And it always feels like, I'm not ready. I don't know where this is supposed to go. I don't, all of that can be just, it's gotta be backwashed. Right. And the best way to fix this is to automate it and to set it up to where it's set and forget, right? The day that I get paid, I have 15% or whatever that is, $100, $500, $2,000 pulled out of my account, put into my investment account and I never even see it. I don't have to make the decision to invest it every month and what to invest it in. And the best way to bypass this emotional hurdle, this challenge, is to automate that as soon as you possibly can. So it's a long way away. I think you're spot on of this journey that folks take. First, I don't have enough money. I'm just trying to fight to feed, put food on the table. The second you bypass that, it's time to start putting money and feed both masters, right? Make sure you take care of yourself now, but also take care of your future self.
Right. Fair.
Yeah.
So most of the guests that you've had and the stuff that you do personally, is it investments, stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, stuff like that?
Very little now.
Things
Definitely up front. My podcast was heavy in that space, but that's only because I knew nothing about it. And so at that point, I was trying to figure out, like, I've got this stockpile of cash that I'm sitting on. What do I do with it? And as I got those answers, and now I speak with folks that have built either almost exclusively passive or 100% passive portfolios. They've been able to acquire businesses or start hustles that then they can outsource and have free cash flow coming in from a side hustle or from a main hustle, right? My main goal here is to build a portfolio that can take care of Ash and I, our expenses month over month without having to work at all, right? That's the type of portfolio that I want to set up. Yeah.
So that's to say that it may be partially investments, but also maybe into real estate or other businesses, or insert investment here.
You're spot on. All of the above. I mean, lots of folks that have done the investment world of certified financial planners, folks that have done the investments themselves, folks that have written books. I spoke with Cody Sanchez last week that she buys small businesses. And so baby boomers are at a point now that they're starting to retire. Most of them, 18% of them, according to her, do not have someone to roll that business over to, and they don't know they have an asset that they can sell. And so they're letting their businesses expire, right? And there are these laundromats or plumbers or these businesses out there with giant email lists and websites and businesses, a constant business customer base that they're starting to expire. And Cody is going through and snatching these up and finding folks to manage them, outsource the management. I've talked to folks that have invested in raw land, self-storage. I mean, across the board, all of these produce passive cash flow in their overall portfolio.
Interesting. So have you changed what you do with investing, stuff like that, just based on the interviews that you've had?
Yeah, definitely. Two ways. One, the first thing that when I started the podcast, I started out of, I mentioned desperation, so desperate that I had a 401k, I had an HSA, things that my company allowed, but a personal brokerage account and what I would invest in, I had not set up. And so once I had someone on the podcast to tell me, this is who you need to go with, and this is what that investment should look like. And I went through the idea of index funds, and I even spoke with this guy, I cannot remember the name of the book, but it was like the Prepared Investor, Chris Mansky. And it was like in February, right before COVID hit. And then I interviewed him again the second time in March in the middle of COVID. And he told me stocks to go invest into. So I've had folks like that give me direct advice to build my portfolio off of. Now I'm in kind of what I would look like as phase 2. I've really doubled down on Cody Sanchez. This year, I will house hack. So I've interviewed Craig Curelop and the folks over at Bigger Pockets to be able to house hack this year. And my third piece is I will start to do a little bit of angel investing probably next year, January of next year. This year will be my chance to attach myself to a few folks that do great at evaluating, Judy Robinette and things like that. I think in January, I'll pull the trigger on my first company that I'd like to take that journey with.
Nice.
Yeah,
it's
been incredible, man.
Yeah, that's very cool. How does Ash respond to all this?
She just stays in the room, man. No, I'm kidding. She's listen, on a serious note, she listens to every podcast, listens to every episode, and has taken advice from several of the freelancers. I've had freelance writers and authors come on the show. and now has her own business as well, her own
Oh,
side
very cool.
business. So she's got a 9 to 5 and a side hustle where she does freelance writing. She landed a millennial advisor gig this morning, and so now we both have this weird title of millennial advisors, which is interesting.
Oh, funny.
But yeah, we've both sort of taken off on this this journey here to build a couple different avenues, a couple different cash flowing assets, and we'll see where we're at in 18, 24 months.
So is the idea that you guys compete then?
Well,
Who can make the most money as
in the
a
house,
millennial advisor?
I mean, the big idea for everyone else is I just don't want a 9 to 5, man. I think that's
Sure.
most millennial Gen Z folks. You hear them talking about this now of like, I went out of the rat race. It's not that. I don't necessarily love what I'm doing, right? As far as sales. I went
Your
to
day
school.
job.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I went to school to be a coach. I played college football, football paid for school, and I know the impact that a good coach, that a good advisor can have on you. And I wanted to rinse and repeat that. I wanted to replicate that. So I went to school to be a coach. And 2 or 3 months before I graduate, my academic advisor, she sits me down and says, Josh, you're about to graduate number 1 in your class. Do not go into coaching. She's like, you need to go find a way to make some money. And then if years down the road, this is still speaking to you,
Sure.
maybe you fall back on that, but you have some padding at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was great advice. And that's how I've gotten to this point is I have pinned my ears back and I am running full speed for the next few years with the goal of building this portfolio that can take care of us.
Nice.
From there, I should have a couple of these advisor roles and a couple pieces of real estate, and maybe a small business. And then I can step back and go to a dojo and become a sensei there, right? And maybe just teach the 6:30 class or go teach, I don't know, flag football or something. But I can go stroke that, which it's been calling me for years. I think I'm kind of doing that now with podcasting, right? I kind of feel like I'm coaching folks, but there's an itch there that I will definitely fall back on and scratch here in the years to come.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That is interesting to essentially build that money machine so you can have the freedom to do essentially what you want.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I spoke with these guys, and I know I've rattled off like 12 names, but I spoke with these guys, this combo, John Marshall and Andrew Freeman. And these guys owned a storage business, a self-storage business. They had like 56 facilities across the United States.
Wow.
But they called that the retirement plan. And originally they had built an Amazon arm, this Amazon reseller arm. And so they do all of the big Amazon resales for Target and Best Buy, and they landed a couple of really big clients. And so at this point, they call that like their cash engine. It's just month over month producing more cash flow than they know what to do with. And then all the excess, they pump that into self-storage. And obviously self-storage is longer growing. There's a longer period of return, right? You're expecting that to last much longer versus the monthly cash flow. You're really looking for the appreciation side of it and that. So they have a daily sort of cash flowing engine. Then they have a retirement plan. And I think long-term that posture positioning is really attractive to me. And I like the idea of having a couple advisor roles and maybe something on Kindle Direct Publishing and something, 3 or 4 avenues that are able to feed you today. And then the excess you're putting into an avenue that feeds you tomorrow.
All right. Clever. I like it. Yeah. The real estate thing is definitely, from what I've seen, that's a feed you tomorrow thing, but it can really feed you tomorrow.
Especially the self-storage. I went down a deep rabbit hole on that and
have you really?
I found that folks, I mean, when we're not in COVID, when things look at their very best in the country, and there's just money all over the place, they're buying more, they need somewhere to put their excess stuff, right? And so they go to self-storage. Yeah. On the other way, when they're in the middle of COVID and people are losing their jobs and they're trying to downsize and there's nobody in classrooms and there's nobody in businesses, they clean all that out or they reduce in size and they have to put the excess stuff from there into something, which goes into self-storage. And so it's like either way, if we're in a booming economy or if we're in an economy that's being crushed, folks look to self-storage for something, and it's been
Mm-hmm.
really, really attractive. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It's an avenue that I've looked at hard.
Yeah, it's I looked at that. We have a Tracty Building Systems in the town that I'm at,
Mm,
and that's their game. They build the self storage units,
exactly.
and they have people coming nationally, all over the place, investors that are coming to learn how and what to do, and they have that game dialed in pretty tight.
Yeah, man. There's a
So,
couple things you can do to trim some fat, right? And
mhm,
this is not just in self-storage. This is in many businesses, but there are some things that you can come in and do to the self-storage guys. They no longer sell boxes. They accept no cash. There's nobody working the front office.
mhm,
There's an electric gate, so they have control of everything remotely.
mhm,
All payments are automated.
yep,
They've come in and implemented some things that the typical mom and pop shop couldn't do or wouldn't do. And because of that, they trim some fat, they increase their margins, they see more profits, they get everyone paying the same thing. There's some things they implement that, man, they've really figured it out. Like you said, they have it down to a science.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting when you think about all the different ways and just things that you can invest in.
It's incredible.
Like it's more than just stock market or a chunk of land. There's a lot
Yeah,
going
man.
on.
Yeah, you're not lying. It's almost overwhelming, right? Like you get in a position like I'm in, like you're in, to where you hear of so many opportunities, and then you're like,
Hmm.
man, what excites me? Where do I spend my time? I like
Yeah.
all of this. Where do I
Mhm.
go from here?
So I'll ask you a direct question, right? You can tell me if you're not cool answering it. But what investment have you found the biggest return or most routine or secure return, however you want to answer
Yeah.
it?
I'm very, very comfortable answering it. I'm very risk averse.
Hmm.
And that's just money script that I was born with, that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. My little brother is not. I've got three other brothers. One of them is so heavy into cryptocurrency that I can't sleep because of how aggressive he is. Like it
Wow.
freaks me out. I'm on the other end of that. I am very risk averse. I lean the opposite way of
Okay.
risk. And because of that, I've put, let's call it 90% of my funds in index funds,
All right.
which has been, I mean, by far my biggest returner over the last 12 months. I
They're
think
doing
it's something,
phenomenal.
dude, you're telling me it's over 30% returns right now.
Yeah.
And so you won't catch any complaints. They won't. I think if we did this podcast in 12 months, I wouldn't have such an attractive answer. But right now, I feel like Warren Buffett with the investment decisions
I
I've
got it
made.
nailed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got it down to a science, man. And to be clear, I'm funneling everything. I think most of the folks that I speak with, and I'm not a certified financial planner or approved or anything
Hmm.
like that. The folks that I've spoken with lean heavy towards looking at the total stock market index or of something of that nature. I am a little bit more risk savvy, or leaning a little bit closer to risk, because I do the S&P 500. So
Hmm.
I'm not as broad. I'm sort of betting on America, like Warren Buffett says. I'm going to put my
Right.
money in America.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's paid off really well, man.
Yeah.
I
Even
have done, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say even Warren Buffett advises index stocks.
That's exactly right. I think
He's like, there's some years that index stocks beat him.
I listened to his speech last year, the most recent one that he gave, where COVID, and so he was sitting by himself in that room, and that's exactly what he said. It's like, if I could do this all again, I would just put all of my money in America, the S&P 500. I would just bet on America. And I posted on my social. I sent that to everybody. I'm like, listen to what this
Nice.
guy is saying, right? Yeah, I mean, they've simplified it significantly for us, even to a second step now, because they have these target retirement funds, right?
Hmm.
And so the S&P 500 stays fixed forever. I mean, as far as it's always going to be 100% stocks, ETFs, and they're going to be
Hmm.
exchanging companies. The target retirement fund is the perfect allocation of stocks, bonds, total stock market, bonds, total stock market, stocks, the perfect allocation. And as you approach retirement, it reallocates itself heavier
Hmm.
to bonds, less in stocks, to be less risky for you as you become closer to retirement. And so
Hmm.
almost all the advisors that I've had, the folks that have written their books, the Brian Portnoys, the Dr. Brad Clances of the world, come on and talk about the target retirement funds. I go one step more aggressive with the S&P 500, but that's all the above. Index funds are the way to go for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I
will
love them
say-
because you don't need a person. You don't need an advisor. You can do it yourself. The costs are on the verge of negligible.
Exactly.
You're not paying somebody else.
Yeah, you're spot on, man.
Yeah.
The only time that I've done anything outside of that, where I was like, where I decided to get a bit more aggressive, was right in the middle of COVID. I mentioned I had Chris Mansky on the Prepared Investor.
Mm-hmm.
And I had him on the first time, and on the podcast, he mentioned, I don't know if you've heard, but there's this thing called the coronavirus, and it's in Japan right now. It's in China right now. But it hadn't hit the US yet. And it was so weird to hear.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I went back, I listened to it. I'm like, oh, this guy's on to something. I'm going to bring him back on. So I pulled him back on the podcast and said, listen, man, you predicted this, and now we're here. What should I be buying? What should I be selling?
What's next?
What's next? He rattled off like 9 or 10 tickers, stocks to invest in on that episode. And I hit end on the record, went into Vanguard and purchased all those stocks that like right then. And so
nice.
So I have almost everything in index funds. And then there was a day there where I put some money into specific tickers that he gave me that have all done way too well. I could not have done it by myself.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, there's something to be said with reaching in the heads of other people.
100%.
So, I mean, just everybody collectively has a little bit of knowledge, and together is even a ton of knowledge. So that's impressive, man.
That's what this is for, though, right? Is I could go learn this myself, and I could make 3 years of bad decisions, right? And
Or 20.
Yeah, 20 years of bad decisions.
Right.
Or I could pull him on, have him on for a year and a half, or an hour and a half, 2 hours, and say, reduce the learning curve for me.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the 80-20 on your field. What do I need to know?
That's cool.
And have them reduce that for me. And then you make those decisions and they pay off the first time instead of
You learn what it took them decades to learn in an hour.
Exactly.
So that's cool. Just shorten that time frame. Then time's on your side.
That's exactly
right. Which is
a
huge thing for investments.
Yes, sir.
Time and money, man. That is cool. Well, Joshua, thanks so much for being on the show. This time flew.
Yeah, man. I cannot believe it's been an hour. That's incredible.
I know you got to get rolling, so we can wrap this up. That said, really quick, if someone were to come to you and say, hey, I have X amount of dollars I want to spend, and let's just say it's more than $20 or something like that, I want to invest it. What is the quick and dirty, easy thing that I should invest in? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would, whichever account you have, Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, it's not worth spending the time to evaluate. Whatever one you're using, keep using it. Put the money into that and put that into one of these index funds, a total stock market or the S&P 500.
Nice.
From there, don't look at it again.
Awesome. Just let it do its job.
That's it. They will take care of it for you. That's
awesome. I love it. Well, Joshua, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you?
Yeah, James, thanks for having me, by the way, man. This was really fun. I appreciate the preparation, man. These times, an hour doesn't blow by if you're bored, right? So I appreciate, I appreciate you making this fun. Where can the folks find me? I'm very, very easy. I am on all the social media, but the easiest place to find me is rhodestowwealth.com. Recently I interviewed this domain expert. He gave me wealthinterviews.com as well, which is great. So both of those point to my website, but rhodestowwealth.com has all my podcasts, all my social media, all that good stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Joshua.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We are underwritten locally by the Bank of Sun Prairie. If you're listening to this on the web, which you probably are, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with all your entrepreneurial friends, as well as your friends that are looking for cool investments, like what Joshua was talking about. My name is James Kademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering services for businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com. as well as Draw In Customers Business Coaching, offering business coaching services for entrepreneurs looking for growth, which should be all of them, on the web at drawincustomers.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Joshua Rhodes, the founder of the Rhodes to Wealth podcast. Joshua, can you tell us one more time where they can find your podcast?
RhodesToWealth.com.
Awesome. Super easy. And Rhodes is Rhodes.
That's correct.
All right. Awesome. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.